vårt seminarium om motståndet och den globala aktivismen. Som ni vet så skulle vi ha haft Angie Thomas här som har tyvärr ställt in på grund av hälsoskäl, men vi har andra deltagare. Och seminariet arrangeras av Union som är den svenska fackföreningsrörelsens biståndsorganisation där jag är chef, Kristina Henschen. Och det kommer äga rum på engelska och är 45 minuter långt. Varmt välkomna. Welcome to you, Sharan Burrow, the leader of what we say in Swedish, fackade, the International Trade Union Confederation, with 181 workers being organized in total. You're warmly welcome. You came all the way today here to be part in this seminar on activism. And also welcome to you, Magnus Dennart, who is one of the founder of the network I am here, jag är här. You are both here today on this book fair, but we all know that there's an alternative book fair taking place for the first time, as far as I know, in Gothenburg. And why did you not boycott this book fair? And why did you join this book fair? And why do you think it's important to be here today, Sharan?
Well, because Union asked me. And no, indeed, I think it's a very difficult question. If you think of the context, there's no doubt that the world is polarized, and it's increasingly so. We have three tendencies. One is the populist right, the alternate right, neo-Nazism, whatever term you put on that. The second is an increasing authoritarian or even dictatorship tendency, even where governments are theoretically or so-called actually elected, but they're not, they're in theory democratic leaders, but they're not. And the third one is really that born of conflict in societies where you're seeing those who have a base, like Donald Trump, where he thinks he has to defend white supremacy. So I think on one hand we would say we don't believe that white supremacy is something you can accept and therefore include in the discussion, although we should talk to the people about why they're choosing, in my view, why they're choosing to that pathway. Likewise, neo-Nazism, we must all fight the rise of neo-Nazism, but there are people, human beings, and some of them may in fact simply be looking for our attention. So if I can just take a moment, I'll give you the research. There's a research done, you may all recall that Joe Cox, who was a British MP, actually was murdered by, a crazy guy. But her husband, Brendan, and a group of friends, including another organisation, Purpose.com, they built this framework called More in Common. And they did research to see why it is that people are so harsh in their thinking about the acceptance of refugees, when most of us are migrant nations. Many of us live in mixed families. Many of us are internationalists. And the research is very striking. 20% of the world's people are simply part of whatever you call that alternate right grouping. And it's tough. Their view from the research is that it's only intergenerational change that will make a difference, and that means our schools are so important. Then there's about 30% of us on average who you would call cosmopolitans. We're open, you're here, you're debating ideas, you have progressive views, you stand with each other, you believe in things like socialised healthcare and support for those who are unemployed or are vulnerable. And then there's about 50%, if you do the figures. Now, they're our neighbours, and are we simply not going to talk to them because they're not part of us? Do we simply impose with a demand that they share our values or else. I personally believe, our unions believe, that while our position on things like refugees, for example, is that refugees are welcome everywhere, nevertheless, we have to engage with our neighbours, some of our families, our brothers and sisters, and certainly trade unionists and friends in England will tell you that Brexit divides their families and their communities. So if we don't find a way to engage, then actually we're writing off human beings who are frightened mostly, and until we tackle that fear, till we can show them that actually inclusiveness, democracy, freedom is a better future for all of us, then I think we risk becoming the minority. So should people allow that tendency to bait into an event like this? On balance, you'd have to say yes, at least to have the conversation if it's respectful.
Very interesting. So boycott is not part of that strategy. It's rather a dialogue that is important and that the dialogue should be inclusive.
Well, we'll boycott when in fact we think it's such a dramatic piece, like the Turkey at the moment. All of the unions are boycotting right throughout Europe, with the ITUC and the ITUC and International Labour Organization conference in Turkey. Why? Because Erdogan's a dictator, and to be legitimated by being there, or to provide legitimacy for his government by being there, to put our own colleagues at risk when already 140,000 of them have been dismissed or incarcerated, and then more in civil society. Even a UN judge indeed has been tried and found guilty of treasonous acts. Then we can't accept that. But to engage with people, to try and understand what's generating the fear, and to try and promote in an evidence-based way, but also an emotional, a sympathetic, emotional way, our view of the future. I think that's different. But dialogue's definitely the centerpiece.
Magnus, you are experienced as an internet activist, having started this network with the hashtag Jag är här, I'm here. You're also here.
Yeah, I am here.
At the book fair. Why is that?
Well, obviously we had this discussion in the group, and first maybe I should say that we're a non-party political group that fight for an internet free from hate and racism. I don't want to say that we're against anything, not like that. But we pretty soon came to the conclusion that we don't want to let any extremists scare us off and take up our space. It's pretty similar to what we do online. We want to own the arena. We want to let as many people as possible state their mind, and so it was a pretty easy decision actually. And I should say that we are also on the alternative book fair. We're everywhere.
Yeah, you are everywhere. Maybe there are persons here are part of I am here, Jag är här kampanjen. We have at least 2 in the audience, 3. I'm part of it as well. Can you explain a little bit more on how this works and what it is?
Yeah, both me and my wife have spent lots of time online and in the commentary fields, both privately and also in my job at the Swedish Public Service Network, SVT. I've been moderating lots of forums and sites during the years. Many times there was the same problems, that rather few decided the tone, and that they were hateful or they were aggressive, and pretty soon the other people either they got bored or too scared to express themselves, and that is in fact threat against democracy, I think, if you let yourself, or if you let few people silence the majority. So what we did was that we thought we must find a method to fight against this. So we started to go into commentary fields where there were lots of hate and racism and such, and said no. We said you must stop this, and started to behave in a decent way, no foul language and no what do you say when you're like
when you're diminishing someone.
Exactly. Nothing like that, just behaving decent to each other. And we started to use the hashtag I am here, so that other people could find us. And people started to join the group, and pretty soon there were lots of us. And then it's much more easy to, find the courage to write a comment or to pep talk someone else. We have had so many messages and SMS from people who say that today I wrote my first comment and thank you so much. And it's like a schoolyard, if you're bullied or you see someone else who is bullied. If there are 20 or 50 or 75,000 people as we are today who says, please don't do that, just in a decent way, then you just stops to be scared. And it's been really good.
It's also as the same as I hear Sharan speaking about respect and dialogue. It started 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember, and it was quite a success. And as part of the network, you could see, let's go out and mark this post here, and mark that you are here, that we see and we support. And it was very sweet, but are the activities as high as they were in the beginning? Or do you have to transform now?
Actually, it's not, but that doesn't mean that the people in the group are less eager to be active or that they comment less on the internet. But I think the biggest reason that there is not as much activity as in the beginning is that there is not as much hate in the commentary fields. We see a huge difference, especially in the established media's commentary fields.
Interesting. Why is that?
I think that the haters just got tired. They knew that if I go in here and tell this person this and that and scream and shout, then the I am here people will come and take the fun out of it and start a serious discussion, and that's not what I want. So their hate slowly, how do you say?
Decrease?
No,
stops?
In the commentary fields, if you write a comment, you get the latest one on top, and the hate slowly falls to the bottom of the page and is soon invisible. So I think they got tired and bored and returned back to their own forums.
But do you think we can change whatever it is that's triggering that hate? Can we undo the rationale that people have? And it's often an angry rationale born of either desperation or exclusion or having been bullied themselves or feeling like nobody knows, nobody sees them. But do you think, as a general piece in our communities, can we actually touch people to the point where they recognise we've got more in common than actually difference?
I don't know. With some people, yes, and with some, no. I think if you're really, really far out, 100% hater, well, maybe it's hard. I don't think that we can do it in I am here because they really hate us. But I think that the people who are a bit worried or a bit scared or think that the world is in some ways upside down, and I think that we can really, win them over, or I don't know how to express myself. And that's like the main target group for us, I think. And also with fake news has been really, established phenomenon the last year or so just. And that's also very worrying, I think, because I think a lie is a very powerful tool. And there are studies that show if you are faced with a lie, like in a fake news article, then it's very, very hard to turn you over. If you present facts to you, you will still have this feeling. It's emotional that there is something that's not right, and so somehow we must find a way to counteract, is that word, fake news before they reach people.
Well, we used to teach critical literacy. I'm a teacher by trade a long time ago now, but I used to teach critical literacy. So are the foundations for people understanding how to discern, fact from fiction, is it just that it's so explosive? I think you're supposed to be asking the questions, but I'm really interested in this topic because we spend a lot of time thinking about this. I mean, I grew up in a country that gave you one of the worst media exports, or gave the world Murdoch. And, frankly, you take any election around the world in the last 25 years, and his editorial policy has pretty much chosen a side. And most of us would think some of his views were totally fake news. So what is the answer to getting people to be critical thinkers?
I don't know, education maybe. It is really hard. We have this picture, which is kind of fun and also sad, that we show from time to time, where it's a little girl in a news article. She is in the picture, and the headline says that Anna, or whatever her name is, drew a flag in her book in school, and then she was expelled. And the first comment in the commentary fields is like, oh my god, this is terrible, where are we going, this country is going to hell. And the second one says that, calm down, it's just fake, and check this link, and he gives them the source where the actual story says, and it's all just made up. And then the next comment is, I don't care if it's fake, it's still fucked up. So, well, that's kind of hard to fight. But I think you need to make people, first understand that there are lots of fake news, and that there are a huge difference between established media and how they work. They're following press ethical codes, and they have publishers. Never mind that word, it's disappeared. But compared to alternative media, they have none of the above. And I think that if people just get more aware of this fact, and that there are, you need to, source criticism isn't just something that happens by itself. You as an individual have to take some responsibility for what you read. And it's not that hard, it's a few clicks and Google away, and then things would get much better.
What is your assessment, Sharan? I mean, here we are here on quite a powerful strategy and quite a huge success in actually transforming the commentary fields. Fake news and this kind of hate speech, is that something you meet in your work as the leader of the trade unions globally?
Yes, I was just sitting here thinking about in some ways it's easier for us to stand and resist it or ignore it, I think. But if you take our campaign to eliminate slavery and corruption, slavery in Qatar, you know, the first tactic from the Qataris was to actually simply deny the facts. And of course, I'm a teacher by trade and I'm a union organiser, and that was my first job in the union, and I still think it's the most important tool we have. So we had walked the camps, the work sites of Qatar, and we decided to expose slavery in the Gulf states. And so it was eyewitness accounts, and I used to teach history and English, probably figuring that out. So, you know, for us, eyewitness accounts are the most powerful facts. So we didn't even put out a report. Our partners did, Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. We did some media. We certainly told our members. We did stories and documentaries and so on. But our first real report was like 2 to 3 years into a subtle campaign about exposing the truth. And of course, when the fact that they denied what we'd said didn't work, they hired a PR company, and I suddenly had those lovely trolls on my Twitter account, and they made a video, The Dark Side of the ITUC. It's a pretty pathetic attempt, can I say? But nevertheless, it was intimidation tactics. We were hacked, our systems were hacked. In fact, an email from one of my closest colleagues in terms of working on this campaign was taken and amended, so it was actually fraudulently stolen in the first place, but then one line was added to, so it was definitely fraud. But you know, it can add up. And some of my team were quite scared. I've been through, you know, I've been a leader of the Australian trade union movement and then internationally, and so I suppose in that sense I'd had experience in a background of being attacked. You know, I was telling people the other day when we first took on a paid maternity leave campaign in Australia, the shock jocks, does that translate? The really ugly radio commentators used to say that I would be responsible for never seeing women employed again and that I'd bring down small business. So I had some background in kind of resisting this, but my staff were a bit, a lot of them were young. Some of the more senior ones were with me that you just ignore it. And ironically, I want to tell you the upside of this, because standing together, building our union movement into a campaign against modern slavery, now we have, in fact, a little bit like your solidarity in the, what is it, I'm here, I'm going to join, what is it, I'm here?
Yeah, it is I'm here, but that's the English group, because we're quite big in Germany and in Spain.
So a bit like that on the internet, we've built an alliance with a mining magnate in Australia who just happens to have a passion about this. I wouldn't agree with him on some things, particularly around climate and the like, but on this one he wants to eliminate slavery. With a group of businessmen that I work with in the B team, leaders who know their companies aren't perfect but want to change the world, with the anti-slavery movement, now with the ILO and the UN. And we've built a movement around this because the union had the courage not just to stand up but to take legal complaints where we could. The good news is, maybe, keep your fingers crossed, that next weekend I'll be in Qatar, because they now want to open dialogue around what might create an open door to settle the question of rights and decent work. It'll take some time, but if the door's open, then there would be people in our ranks who'll say, well, how can you talk to people who've perpetuated a model of modern slavery? And my answer to that is the trade unions always fight. You know, we always defend. I mean, we're known as troublemakers, but actually in the end, dialogue is the way you settle the question, because if you're just making trouble but you don't want to fix the problem, well, ultimately that does get... So keep your fingers crossed. But yes, I mean, but we expect it, I suppose. The difference is that now it's got a lot of resources behind hate campaigns, and they can destroy people's lives if you've not had the background, the experience, the solidarity that people who lead trade unions have.
Mm-hmm. because what I'm, you know, it must also be, of course, it's horrendous, but it must also mean that the work of the trade unions was really a threat to someone if they put so much resources into trying to spread those fake news around it.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because it's so weird. Our group, we're really not trying to change anyone's opinion. You can be a member of any party and still be a member. All you need to do is act non-hateful. You cannot be a racist or sexist. But that is still very controversial to some people, apparently. We've been exposed on a number of Nazi sites online. People have been calling us our cell phones and published names of our cars and kids, and putting stickers on our doors, and that goes like for all the admins of the group, I think. And they've been calling colleagues at my work and calling us terrorists and trying to they're having this idea that it's all a big conspiracy with the established media funding us. It's $1 billion, no, not $1 billion, $1 billion kronor industry, they say, and it's like, please give me $1 billion, but unfortunately not. Yeah, so it's so.
But does this mean that their strategies are changing when they can't get you as in their negative comments? They turn on you personally. Is that what you're saying, or has that always been a problem? Was that a problem from the beginning?
No, not from the beginning. But when we grew big, it started. So they probably feel intimidated, and you know they have lost their space where they earlier could write anything, and they literally own the no, not literally, but the commentary fields. You know, it was so easy for them to just one or two people could totally kill a commentary field.
Isn't this an historic pattern? Like, yes, it's new technology, but if you go back to the current environment in the US and, you know, go to the kind of, you know, KKK historical piece, it was to intimidate, you know, those who were not of the white and weren't of the white race, and therefore anybody who sided with them, pick Nazi Germany or any part of the move through the EU. It was about every kind of, you know, oppositional torment that you could actually employ on someone. But if you take heart from history, people have won those battles. I must say, last week I was at the UN General Assembly week, and when I saw two things, it kind of made me really disturbed. And then on Monday, yes, the election in Germany, Sunday, then I suddenly realised the result of that. But you had Donald Trump say he was going to obliterate a country. Now, do I hold any sympathy for the leader of North Korea? No. But on the other hand, there used to be something we'd settled called a just war. So to hear the president of a country say he was going to actually obliterate a nation, that's people, that's human beings. And then, in addition to that, you know, Erdogan, so-called President Erdogan of Turkey, actually said about the now more than 200 journalists, I think, who've been disappeared, incarcerated, dismissed from their jobs, that they were all terrorists and spies. I have to say, I know a lot of these people. They're courageous voices in the mainstream media and some on social media who are exposing a regime that's become a dictatorship. And that, I mean, they're our colleagues. I was sort of so shocked that anyone could just make such a sweeping statement. And it's fake news. Sounds way too weak to call it fake news. It's an abomination that a president could say those things. And then when I was in Berlin on Monday and Tuesday, and to see, I think it's 88, but 80 odd seats in the parliament go to, and many of them will in fact align themselves with neo-Nazi groups, you think we have to have a solidarity to organise everywhere, on social media, through the mainstream media. I mean, we have to protect our journalists here who are standing up, and of course through the trade union movement and civil society groups. If we don't, we're not going to save or build the strength of our democracies for our children and grandchildren. And I think it's now a very serious threat, and history can teach us some things.
But this is very, very interesting and important, because I guess it must feel very lonely, although you have 75,000 members in your network. The day those haters knock on your door, where are they? It's very convenient to be in your sofa and press like and write, I'm here. But to turn that internet activism into practice in real life solidarity, how do we do that?
I think we can do it in the same way, by starting to, if someone, it can be the smallest thing, says something that just isn't right or sounds weird or is rude to someone, you can just say, hey, please stop that. It's really not nice. She probably doesn't like that you call her a cunt. And I don't think, I think it will work. It's like small steps, and then you will feel more confident and start to share your opinions. I think it's all about engagement, and that will inspire other people. That it's like democracy isn't something that happens every 4th year during the election, but all the time in between. We need to speak our mind and just stand up for...
And it's deeper than that, isn't it? It is standing up, of course, but it's also sharing your humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing is modelling human behaviour that we all want. What do we say to our children? Treat others as you would have them treat you. I mean, that's our common humanity. So it's a very strong kind of defence of who we want to be, and I think that's power.
Yeah, and I think it's so obvious that, shall I call them haters? I do that. The haters are so many less. I mean, the vast majority are decent people. It's just, you hear the one that shouts.
And what you're saying, Sharan, I mean, we are organizing, we are out there, but do we do it do we have to rethink and remodule and re-strategize to meet up those challenges in another way? What do you think? I mean, Gloria Steinem, who's a feminist icon in the US, she recently wrote a very interesting piece on the fact that there are more people out on the streets today than it was during the Vietnam War in 1968. So people are obviously, in some countries, out on the streets protesting. Is it effectful? Is it working? Or are there other ways? Are there, and how will we do with the extremely authoritarian states that are now increasing the repression that we see all over the world?
I think we have to use everything. Of course, people have to be visible, but they also have to be visible now in other ways through social media and the tools that we have, as well as being on the streets. But if you can be proud, I think, of people, and I agree totally. There are more of us who care about each other than those who hate, themselves, each other, whatever the motivation is. Hate difference, because most of it's xenophobic in many ways, or it's that they think society has not given them the opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of motivations, and we do need to understand and separate those. But, when Donald Trump unleashed, literally, unleashed misogyny again first. Women didn't sit down. Those women's marches were brilliant because they said to the world, we're not going to take this. It's over, we're going to fight back. The same on the white supremacy piece. You know, people didn't sit down, they did fight back. And in a few weeks' time I'll be in the heart of Missouri in St. Louis, where of course the Black Lives Matter piece is very, very tense right now because of some legal actions, but legal judgments around the murder of a black man. And you can't, there's no magic solution to that. You have to engage. You have to talk to people. You have to find settlements that make everybody feel like they've got some space in a future, unless they choose to be the minority that exclude themselves. And I don't know that we'll ever win 100% of the people, but I think human beings have a set of values that we can call democracy, we can call, you know, whatever we like. For us, the ultimate is actually accepting that democratic values are about freedom, rights, inclusion, anti-racist, anti-sexist legal structures and so on. So I think we just have to have trust in the majority, but we need leaders in any sphere, and that's clearly what you have here. And I'm finding I am here, I didn't know about it till now, and I must say, I think it's inspirational, so congratulations.
But how do we go forward in very repressive states where, let me take Belarus as an example. The 2nd of August, the Free and Democratic Trade Union movement was attacked with a raid to their offices, and several persons were arrested. There's still one person, the economist Igor, in jail. He may face several years of imprisonment due to false accusations of tax evasion. How do we go forward with those authoritarian and very repressive states? Would the, I mean, it's such a challenge, and they are increasing all over the world. In the latest 3 years, 69 countries took measures to hamper the activities of the civil societies to act and to organize. How will we change this? How will we stop this anti-democratic wave of repression that we see all over now?
That's a small question. I really don't know, but do you have the answer, maybe?
Again, it comes back to people. Why did the Berlin Wall come down?
Yeah.
You know, why pick any point in history where you've seen dictatorship, suppression overturned? And of course, I'm privileged to lead a movement of 180 million workers around the world, and so I walk many of those situations. You know, I said it earlier, but our unions are defending the Muslim people locked in a state of emergency in the Philippines by a crazy president, elected, but a crazy president who simply says you can shoot people if he doesn't think they're worthy citizens, drug dealers, you know, human rights is last thing as he'll shoot human rights defenders. That's all of our people. So, and those in civil society organisations, and yet those people stand up every day. And I'm always inspired by their confidence and their courage that they can change things. If you go to Belarus, which is the piece you picked, I mean, this guy's a dictator. There's no question about that. There was nothing democratic that came out of the breakup of the Soviet Union as far as Belarus was concerned. And, you know, our unions, our independent union, has been raided, incarcerated, worse. There's been decrees that effectively render working people in that country to the risk of forced labour or modern slavery. So, but we haven't gone anywhere. We won't go away. Even though it looks bleak at the moment there in Kazakhstan, in other parts of that region. I talked about Georgia just 2 weeks ago, and our own president won an election from his own people in the face of government opposition, unheard of. And so I think in the end, you have to just take heart from your history. We have new tools, we need to use them wisely, but using everything we have, from people being courageous enough to stand together, to actually having the debates and the discourse that figures out what we have in common and how we build democracies that protect that for everybody. I don't have any other answer. Organise. The trade union movement would say that, but we are putting more and more money into organising, more and more money into solidarity with civil society, and because that is, in our view, the only answer.
Yeah, and maybe I think also politicians and media in some ways need to believe that people are interested in constructive debates and talks and not just quick fixes. Because it's very, sometimes it feels like, you know, we have these extreme organizations that spread racism and behave like crazies. And during this, the rest of us sitting in a ring in the middle and fighting about how we should deal with this problem. So we need, like, you know, to unite and start a constructive talk and move forward, and not just...
We need to demand our politicians stand up too, though. Your Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, many of you probably don't know, but he's taken a global initiative to call on people to do just that. It's called the Global Deal, and it's all about dialogue. And it's not about imposing anything, it's about asking people to put up cases where it might be employers and workers, it might be governments and civil society, might be communities, have engaged in a dialogue that's created a settlement around difference. And that's in you know, a different way, the same as I'm here. It's saying engage in dialogue, it is the centrepiece. So as a trade union movement internationally, we've backed that in, the UN's backed it in, the International Labour Organisation's backed it in. But I can tell you that there are politicians who, including in my own country, which devastates me, who don't have the courage, and not only don't have the courage to stand up for inclusion, in my own country, the shame, in a migrant country, the shame people like me have about the way our government is incarcerating refugees, both asylum seekers, into offshore detention centres, is a blight on our humanity. And it is really undermining the democratic rights and freedoms. And he's not alone. I can tell you in my job, I can probably name on one hand the politicians in the world, the leaders, who will take my calls and we can engage in a discussion around either getting their solidarity for an issue globally, whether it's the G20, whether it's the UN, the ILO, the G7 will be in Turin tomorrow with the G7 Labour ministers. Five politicians. A final word from you. What's your call to the audience here? What can they do to join the activists to improve the situation? What do you say, Magnus?
Well, first of all, you should join Jag är här, of course, and take baby steps from there. If you're not used to comment online, you can just hang out with us for some time, and people do that. Just watch the others and maybe write some comments in the group, like, oh, that was a very good argument, but I don't agree with you. Have some small chat, and then one day you will write your first comment, and then you will be stuck.
What do you say, Sharan?
Well, as activists, I would say organise. But as human beings, I want to take a leaf from, you know, Brendan Cox and More in Common. Talk to each other, but more importantly, listen to each other. I think if we make it our daily business to listen to someone that we don't know very well, or even that we do, but we haven't actually heard their fears or their views for a while, talk to each other.
Baby steps, talk to each other and listen. Thank you so much, Sharan Burrow from the International Trade Union Confederation, and thank you, Magnus Denner from Jag är här. It was such a pleasure to have you with us today. A big hand.